AI is not just a technology shift, it's a cultural and behavioral shift as well. People have to rethink the way they work and sometimes, in most cases, the work that they do. The biggest thing for me is that it's not just IT and then throw it over the wall. That's not going to work. That will not work. It's never really worked anyway, but it will definitely be less successful in the AI world.
If you're ready to unlock momentum, you're in the right place. I'm Aaron Kopel, the Momentum Locksmith, and this is where CIOs come to grow. Today, we have a great guest, Diana Williams, who actually is on the Project Brilliant team. She's our Director of Change Management, really specializing there. And the reason for having her on the show, well, first of all, she's great, and you'll learn a lot from her, but we're seeing a lot of things happening in the world coming up with AI and change management, and that's really Diana's specialty. So I want to get some time for her to share some of her ideas on what she's seeing with our clients out there in the world to help you guys who listen to the show just understand some of the things that are going on and how you can do those things differently. So with that, Diana, if you could share a bit about your background and sort of, what's brought you to now.
Hi, I'm Diana Williams. I started out in state government work. So I spent 20 years in the Department of Revenue and learned a lot. I didn't realize I was learning a lot about change management at the time, but I learned a lot. Every time the new election came around and a new governor came around, everything changed within the organization, and we had to absorb those changes. And so in that journey, I learned a lot about how people respond to that change and how they don't, how they will wait it out, which is what we learned to do, because as soon as the next election came around, it would go back to the way it was before. And so we would wait it out. And so having some developer background helps me with my job as well, because I have a little bit more, I think, insight into how they do their work. And so when I'm coaching teams or working with teams, I feel like that, having been a developer, that helps me relate to them better. And as soon as they hear that I had a development background, they're like, oh, you're one of us. Right. Which is nice, but then also being able to translate that information to work with the business side of the organization as well. I left my job and the security of state government work to do what I'm doing now, which is coaching organizations through transformations. Vendor come in and do an Agile implementation for us, and I fell in love. It was like, it just made sense. And so when we started shifting back to a more waterfall type of implementation, I decided it was time for me to go do something different. And so that was me leaving the comfort of 20 years of a job and to try out this new field. And it's been probably now a little bit, I don't know, not 20 years, but it's been a few years, and I love it.
So it's being a state government for 20 years is not the normal path to consulting sometimes, but I think it gives you a good background, especially, dealing with corporations that are just sort of stuck in their ways, right? Very similar to how government works. And that's, something we try to help them unlock momentum, of course, but it's an interesting thing to really get into because you see a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different companies now, and you can always compare that back to that sort of, that baseline of state government and how things were there. So like you said, coming at it from being one of them, like as a developer, but also as someone who was in that kind of environment, I think a lot of the companies that we help a lot are in those same kind of situations, even now. Like, like you said, it's maybe not been 20 years, but it's been a while since you left the government. And, a lot of companies are still operating that same kind of approach. You can empathize with them pretty well and understand where they're coming from and be able to help them meet them where they are and help them forward. So,
yeah, I think another advantage too is that we've been working a lot with regulated industries. And so we're all about regulations in state government. So that has definitely been a bonus too, with working with different banks and insurance companies and others who are heavily regulated, that I understand the challenges that they face when they can't just make a change. There's things they have to go through. There's hoops they have to jump through. So that has definitely helped a lot.
Well, Diana, it's great to hear about your background, sort of how you came to now, but I'm kind of curious, with your years of experience in state government and consulting and everything else and in life, right? You've got kids, grandkids, and all that kind of stuff. So what's a key piece of advice looking back that you wish you had when you were younger? What's a piece of advice that you would give your younger self?
The key piece of advice for me would be to network more. My corporate America job was network more. Go to network events, get comfortable going to conferences and presenting. Those are all really critical things.
Why is that important?
I was joking with my son recently. He was trying to get a job and he knew someone who knew someone. And so that's how he got his job, right? And so it's the contacts that you make. It's being able to say, hey, it's not just about what I can get out of it, but just networking, and then knowing that, hey, this person over here needs this type of position, is open this job. And so, hey, person, like this, they're looking for the same type of skills that you have. And so being able to help people, right? Going back to what I want to, the kindness and helping people. And so networking is more about just seeing all the opportunities out there, whether they're beneficial to me or beneficial to someone else. It's just being able to connect the dots and connect people.
What I've seen from you as well is just learning opportunities. So I think you've done a great job of networking with a lot of the high profile people in the agile and change management world. And so, the opportunities to go out and learn from them and meet them and just like become friends with them and go have coffee and stuff like that's been pretty tremendous. Like building that network of people that you can call on if you have questions or odd things come up that are out of the norm. You've got that just sort of network you can reach out to anytime. So
yeah, I used a contact recently that I was like, hey, I just need to bounce an idea off of you. I've got this thing stuck in my head and I want to get a different opinion on it, right? Like, am I thinking about it correctly? Or are there other ways of thinking about it? And so having that strong network is they'll challenge your assumptions sometimes. And that's really, really important, that you're not always stuck on that same idea.
Yeah, that's a good point. And really, that's how we learn a lot, having that curiosity and then be able to reach out to people. And that's one of the things, I've tried to get in the habit of when I meet with people, especially people I don't know, but people I do know too, I ask them as well, but it's who else do you know that I don't know that I should know, right? Who else should I go learn from or have a coffee with? Or, is there anything I can help someone else that with, right? If there's a challenge out there that they're not sure how to solve, is there someone I can help, right? Give them some advice if we're in the right direction or things like that. So to your point, it works both ways. It's, there's benefit for you, but there's also benefit for others because you're sharing your ideas that might spur them on to some new action or some new learning for themselves as well.
Yeah. So I'm going to make a plug and say, if anybody out there wants to network, connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to, because I'm trying to get much better at it.
Yep, for sure. As we were prepping for this, big topics of the day really seem to be AI, number one, and then how do you actually get that to work being number two. So, and the big part of it that people are missing. So that's what we want to talk about today a lot. So AI really is everywhere now. We're seeing it more and more with our clients. There's still a few that are probably really just now getting started or maybe not even yet because of regulation, risk management, that kind of stuff. But most of our clients are going down that path in some way. And if their companies aren't, they certainly are personally. They're out there dabbling on the side at home and on their phones and things like that. So they're getting a little bit more familiar. But, what are we seeing from companies that are getting it right and ones that are getting it wrong? What are you seeing?
I think for me, one of the things companies tend to overemphasize is the technical side and underestimate the human side, right? I think now companies have the technology down. They are pretty familiar with what they're doing. The challenge that I'm seeing and hearing is that we've built this thing and no one will use it. And the reason no one is using it is because they didn't bring the people along with them. I find in general that people have a really strong emotional response to AI when they hear it. They don't trust it. For one, they worry about job security, which is a huge, huge, huge thing. They also worry about their expertise being devalued. They've been doing this job for 10 or 15 years, and now all of a sudden, this new system's going to come in and replace them, right? That's the thing that they're worried about. And so it's not just workflow change, it's an identity shift. People are having to shift what they were doing before to something different, and it's got to be managed. And so where companies are failing is when they don't actively manage that change. If they don't actively manage it, technology will not get adopted regardless of how good it is. It could be the best thing they've ever invented, but no one's going to use it because they're afraid of it. I joke that we've seen this movie before, like the tools are changing, but the challenge stays the same, getting people to actually work differently, which is what I really am passionate about. And so when I'm thinking about AI, I actually see it as part of a broader pattern that we've been through many times already, especially in the IT world. Agile, for instance, right, came in and changed how teams are building stuff, focusing on interactions and collaboration versus the silo work. And then we switched over to DevOps, and DevOps came along and changed how we deliver work. We're focusing on automation and continuous delivery. And then digital transformation was the big change in organizations and changed how they are operating, focusing on customer experience and digitalization. But in every case, the biggest challenge wasn't the technology or the framework. It was always the adoption. And so to me, AI is following a similar pattern, but with an added layer. It's now influencing how decisions get made and how work gets done at a much deeper level. And so for me, the lesson that we should carry forward is the same. Organizations that treat AI as a technology rollout will struggle, and the ones that treat it as a people and process transformation will succeed. To me, AI isn't a standalone shift. It's the next evolution of how organizations build, deliver, and decide. If they don't fully learn from the lessons of agile and digital transformations, they're going to have the same challenges with AI.
I think it's, like you said, it's similar patterns that we've seen with agile transformation, with DevOps. And it's also interesting, like the job replacement kind of stuff. I mean, I remember way back in the early days of Agile, as people started to realize what was happening, they started freaking out mostly about middle managers going away, and then a lot of the project management jobs and roles and things like that, which the manager side of it was really what we saw was opening up the opportunity for them to not have to micromanage, let the teams do their stuff and let the managers operate at a higher level. We're still talking about that today. That's still a big topic of conversation for us now. We're trying to build more effective leadership teams. But the other side of it is, like, the part I think is probably more directly related is a lot of the project management functions. When you go to an agile environment, people are more self-organizing and the teams are sort of responsible for themselves. A lot of the task management from someone outside the team, playing that project manager or program manager or project coordinator, there's all those roles that came with it. Those things started to go away, but we still needed the people, right? They just got to do different things that were more useful than managing a Gantt chart, right?
Yep.
And so you start to see that same with DevOps, right? We start automating the jobs of some of the people that were the gatekeepers of change management, which is different than organizational change management. But the IT change management, we started putting automation in place of a lot of those gatekeepers and committees and things like that. People started to get uncomfortable with that in early stages, but now it's great because things happen more quickly, more fluidly with less errors. So do you have an example of companies that are getting it right or getting it wrong?
I have an example of both. I have one where they didn't go well and one where they did. An example where it did not go well was IBM's Watson health system that they were rolling out. They were building an AI system to help doctors make treatment recommendations, which obviously is a high-stakes use case. And one of the biggest issues that they had was that they didn't bring the doctors along in the process. And so they were building out this system, but they didn't actually talk to the people they were building out the system for. And so it was more of a top-down rollout where the expectation was, hey, here it is. Clinicians, just use it. And if you've ever worked in a healthcare system, that is not how it works. You can't just say, hey, here's this new system, use it. There's workflows, there's all kinds of other things that have to be implemented at the same time in order to make it successful. But because it was a top-down, it created a huge trust gap. And so the doctors who are making real life and death decisions, they need to understand and trust the reasoning behind how those decisions are being made. And so with the Watson system, there wasn't any transparency in how the decisions were being made. And so when they were having to make recommendations to their patients and they had questions about why are you recommending this treatment, they couldn't just say because AI told me to, right? So it failed because they didn't understand or they didn't have visibility into why those decisions were being made. And it was a big bang rollout. So here it is, use it, right? There was no back and forth. So the interesting comparison to that is UPS's ORION system, which had a very different outcome. ORION was built to optimize delivery routes. And so more and more packages are being delivered every day. And so their goal was to optimize those so that they could get them delivered more efficiency. Same thing, our drivers initially pushed back for similar reasons. They've been driving this same route for years and years and years. And how dare some machine tell me when to turn left and when to turn right, right? Like, so it's the same thing. But the difference was they rolled it out into a small delivery group. And so they worked with a pilot team, similar to what we did with Agile, right? We started with these pilot teams. And so they introduced it incrementally, working closely with the drivers and operators and actually seeing how the people were impacted, how are the routes being impacted by this system. And they gathered feedback, which was huge. They got the feedback from them, refined the system over time, made improvements based on the feedback that they got from drivers. And by doing that, it helped build trust and buy-in into the system before they scaled it. And so incremental implementation, gather some feedback, continually improve, rinse and repeat. So it started to sound familiar, right? It started to sound like how we do our Agile implementations. So because of this approach, they were able to show results, millions of dollars in cost savings, reduced mileage, and to me, what I find interesting is an environmentally friendly benefit, which is that they use less fuel because they travel less miles. And so to me, there's a environmentally impact on it too, which also helps with buy-in, right? Because so to me, the contrast is really clear. Watson struggled because it didn't account for the human side of adoption. Well, Orion succeeded because it did. So it really shows that AI success isn't about building the system. That's the easy part, right? It's about whether people trust it enough to use it. And that's the harder part.
Sounds like too, like in the both cases, it's really understanding the people that are involved. So not just getting them involved, but also understanding their motivations and things. Because, of course, doctors, very much science oriented, right? They want to see proof of things before they start adopting or doing things differently, because what I'm doing now seems to work well enough. If I'm going to do something different, it needs to be better. You need to prove it to me that it's going to be better, probably, right?
Yeah. Well, and to just be able to I don't know if justify, hey, this is how we came up with this answer. It came up with it somehow. And what was that? I'm going to go off on a side note for a minute. A lot of companies that are starting to adopt or implement AI don't have really good data yet. And so it works great in theory in an applied, like in a sterile environment where they are controlling the data. But then once it goes live into the real world, we call it, the data is not quite as clean. And so it doesn't work. They're not quite getting the same dividends that they thought they would. And so that's causing some of the friction as well.
That's something we've been hearing for many years too, is like your AI is only going to be as good as your data that you're feeding it and training it with and that kind of stuff. So if you got a giant mess and a big pile of garbage there, it's not going to go as well as you want it to, of course, right? And might start getting you bad answers, which is maybe even counterproductive. And so as you think about, other clients that we're working with or ones that we'll work with in the future, how should they be thinking about how to approach this differently than maybe other things or other transformations they've gone through?
I think there's a few things companies need to get right from the beginning when implementing AI, which is, or really any kind of change. I'm going to say this is probably more of a global statement, that anytime you're actually trying to introduce change, I find that there's a lot of parallels between the AI adoption and the Agile adoptions that we've been doing. So when Agile first came out, a lot of organizations focused on the mechanics of it, right? Stand-up, sprints. They didn't really change how they worked. And AI is starting to follow that similar path, right? Companies are implementing tools, but they're not actually transforming how decisions are made or how the workflows are happening. So in both cases, the biggest challenge is still around the people: resistance, trust, leadership, understanding that this isn't a process or a technology change, it's a culture shift. Like, that's a huge difference. And so I have 3 takeaways for an implementation. One is communication. I will say this over and over again: you cannot over communicate your change. Something I remind leaders a lot is that while you've been thinking about this change or this implementation for many, many months, sometimes maybe longer, your employees are hearing it for the first time. And so while it feels repetitive to you, they're just now hearing it, and they need that reassurance. And so however many times you say it one more time. You can't say it enough.
I say that kind of reminds me of a leader I worked with many years ago. But yeah, to your point, change management's always important. But we used to joke that his whole job in the company as the most senior IT person in this big organization was to basically walk around the company like one of those dolls with a string on its back. And whenever you bump into someone, give the message of change management, like pull the string and say the words, right?
Yeah, like one company I was working with, it was an Agile transformation, but they were going around and they were doing they call them the road shows, and until people were impacted by it, even though they'd been to the road shows and heard about it, until it actually affected them personally, they really still weren't getting it, right? And so all of that communication still wasn't enough communication until we got into training and some other things.
Is it like a show they're watching on TV? It wasn't really real to them until then it was real to them. And then it's like, oh, what were we doing again?
And then all of a sudden they're like, what the heck is this thing? And then they've got to communicate some more. And so if when you roll it out as the first time your employees are hearing about it, you're already too late. They should be hearing about it from the beginning, which is my second point, which is involve people early. You absolutely have to involve people early, because here's the thing too, they're already hearing about it. So there are no secrets in corporate America, right? As soon as you start talking about things and start planning things, there's gossip and people are hearing these rumblings about it. And so instead of building something in isolation and building this big thing at the end of it, bring your employees into the process, right? Share what you're exploring, gather some feedback from them, because I guarantee you they're going to have some really good ideas, and they're going to think about things that you didn't think about because they're the ones doing the work. So gather that feedback, let them help shape that solution, and then it's going to build trust and makes adoption much smoother. And really important, they feel like they've had a voice and they feel like they've been heard, right? Really, really important. Bring your employees along. Final one is don't treat your AI implementation as a process or treat it as a process, not an event. It's not a one-time thing, right? We're not rolling it out and saying, hey, this is it, we're done. Have a launch party. That's awesome, but that's not enough, right? Companies that succeed roll things out incrementally, learn as you go, adjust, again, communicate the learnings or the failings. If something didn't work, like acknowledge it and say, hey, we tried this and it didn't work and we're shifting and we're doing this instead, right? Talk about all the changes being made based on feedback, encourage feedback. So to me, it's similar to Agile. The organizations that succeed with AI are the ones that embed it into their workflows and bring their people along rather than just rolling it out and expecting it to stick. That doesn't work.
I find that organizations are pretty Teflon, right? If you just try to throw something on it and hope that it sticks and works, you really have to put more effort into it. It's not just a start, finish, and then, oh, we're done, check the box. It really has to be something where you ingrain it into the culture, and it's just a continuous cycle of learning and refining and iterating and getting better and incorporating that into the DNA of the organization if you really want it to be different, especially something as big as this. Like we said, agile transformation, same kind of thing. It's a culture shift. This is another kind of culture shift, maybe more technology based, but it's still going to be about people and how they change their behaviors. And if you want that to really stick and last long term, like you got to take it from that perspective of a people change, not just technology change.
I'm going to use one of my Southern sayings and saying that you can't just launch something and hope that people will use it. Hope and a prayer is not a strategy for a successful implementation, right? You can't just hope that they'll adopt it. You really have to be intentional about communicating and sharing, because when people feel like change is happening to them, or people want to be involved in the change, but not if they think they're being changed, right? So it looks completely different when they're involved in it. It's the difference between Watson and Ryan. One succeeded and one didn't because of that.
Yeah, that's to that point too. Think about a lot of the factors go into logical change versus emotional change and how do you deal with those things. There's a big impact there, of course. The logical part of it is one thing, but it's the emotional part of it. What does it really mean to me? How involved am I in it? What is it going to mean to my future, my career, and all those kind of things certainly come into play in their heads about, do I really, deep down accept this? And do I want this to happen? Am I going to be a part of it? Right? Or am I going to push back and really, dig my heels in, things like that. So it's taking both sides of that equation.
And I think that's a good point. I think there's a huge gap right now between perception and reality when it comes to AI, how organizations implement it or will implement it. And you've got two sides of that coin, right? The technical and the non-technical. And I think technical people get it. They get how AI is going to be useful. The non-technical, I think I don't know, my analogy is I think they see it like the movie iRobot, where the idea is that AI is going to take over the world, right, and replace everything. And that's a scary thing. So that's the emotional side of it. But the reality is more practical, right? That's not what's happening. Implementing AI is actually very complex and requires the right data that we were talking about, the right systems, the right processes to even work effectively. And so starting small incrementally is going to be what really helps them get there.
Yeah, and to your point, continue to experiment because things are shifting, right? More tools, more capabilities are emerging like every week, right? We're paying a lot of attention to this stuff, and even 3-4 weeks ago, things are different, like drastically different than they were. Like agents are getting better and doing more things, and so the idea that it's just going to be, oh, I can do the same old jobs that I used to do or same old tasks just faster. It's a complete rethinking of what tasks should even exist. I think at this point. It's only going to start, continue changing from here. So.
Yep, 100%. So what I've been seeing is companies starting with more targeted use cases and being very specific and honing into the value that they're wanting to get out of it. And the thing about it is that the goal isn't to replace people outright, but it's to free them up from that low value work and to focus on more strategic, higher impact stuff. And so doesn't mean that jobs won't change. They're absolutely going to change. The roles are going to change. You were talking about project managers earlier. It's not that we didn't need them. We just needed them to work differently, developers, managers. And so all that's going to change, but it's more of a shift in how work gets done and rather than a complete replacement. And I've been looking up some numbers on this because I was just curious, and there's not a single number that says it, but it says that in 2025, around 50 to 55,000 jobs or layoffs were directly related to AI, which seems like a staggering number, which is also that emotional gut reaction to why people don't want to adopt AI. But really, and then globally, it's a little bit higher than that. But studies are showing that AI is actually expected to create more jobs than it eliminates, which is not the message that I think most people are hearing. And so the World Economic Forum is saying that it estimates around 170 million new jobs globally by 2030 compared to about 90 million displaced, right? So it's a net gain. And so it's more about the nuances about this different types of jobs. And so the same recommendations that maybe when we graduated or started college isn't the same job recommendations that people are going to be making in the future. And so, but we are seeing a lot of rapid growth in AI-related jobs like data engineering, which is going to be huge because, again, to our point, that if it's bad data going in, you're going to get bad results coming out. And so even new categories like prompt engineering or AI governance. So it's less about jobs being eliminated and more about jobs evolving. And that's where organizations really, really need to focus on reskilling and helping people transition through that. So because people are scared, and if they know there's a way forward and they know what the future is going to look like and they know that there's a job there, their role might just be different, that helps them with the adoption and the transition as well.
It's really important for leaders to really think strategically about where they want to start to apply AI, what use cases are most important. Because we've seen many examples where people in the organization start getting a little bit concerned about their job, or they just proactively want to start learning, and they start picking up things and they start running in opposite directions. And so get a bunch of people in the same departments, they just go like this in all different directions, and they're just pulling on each other, and nothing productive is actually happening. So really, from a leadership standpoint, getting better alignment with where we're going, where we're trying to use this stuff, defining some use cases that are high priority, that are impactful, really comes back to, just like we've always done with Agile transformation. Where do you start? Well, let's talk about the options. Let's find a high priority initiative that's doable, that we're going to see some business benefit from, so that we can get people engaged and excited and understanding what this really means for us. To your point, they don't really, it's not real to me until it's real to me. And so it's finding some of those kind of use cases and initiatives where we can make it real for the right people to really get on board and start thinking differently about how it's going to go in the future, so that we can help pull everyone else along. So finding those early adopters, key change agents, all that kind of stuff can be really important to really, from a leadership standpoint, getting everyone on board to go in the right direction.
Yeah, and I would say if you could find a win-win in the situation where you're reducing the repetitive day-to-day jobs and you're increasing their strategic work, that and until you're giving them that direction that they're moving in, that is a huge, at least the beginning, your pilot one.
Yeah, for sure. You start connecting the dots, and then they start feeling like what I'm going to be doing in the future is maybe more important or more interesting and more fun than what I'm doing today, this repetitive task that can be automated, right? So yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, to that point, as you think about the future and where this is going and where change management can help us, what do you see leaders need to focus on here in the future?
I'm going to say for CIOs, since that's really who we're targeting with our podcast mostly, is that for CIOs, it really expands beyond IT, right? So we think so much about these IT initiatives, but it's not just about systems and infrastructure anymore. It's about influencing culture, driving adoption, and helping the entire organization adopt to new ways of working. And so we can build it, but if no one's adopting it, or we're not picking the right use cases, to your point, or we're not helping connect the dots between IT and business, then it's not going to get used. Because at the end of the day, business is the ones doing the work and who has to change them. Well, they're changing their workflows and how they're doing it. And so AI is not just a technology shift, it's a cultural and behavioral shift as well. People have to rethink the way they work, and sometimes, in most cases, the work that they do. So that would probably be the biggest thing for me, is that it's not just IT and then throw it over the wall. That's not going to work. That will not work. It's never really worked anyway, but it will definitely be less successful in the AI world.
Yeah, I think that's, the speed of change, and as we start to take out, some of those low level tasks that, the computer can do, it's starting to expose more and more of the just behaviors or things that haven't worked for a long time, that they were kind of covered up. And so we saw that a lot with Agile, right? With a lot of the waterfall processes, once you start getting more transparency, you get good teamwork and collaboration. Some of those things we were doing before just look crazy and silly. Like, why would you ever do it that way? Same kind of thing now, as things start to move faster, become automated, we start looking back and say, why do we ever even do that in the first place, right? We're trying to make this faster, or we should question whether we should even do that anymore. And so it's a lot of that same, we're seeing a lot of parallels between Agile transformation and the approach we took with that, with AI adoption and how we're going to go about that as well in a lot of companies. So lots of similarities there and lots of questions to ask, right? I think the big difference to me, at least what I'm seeing, is that it's just happening faster, right?
Much, much faster. Yeah. It's a more expensive experiment now.
Well, so, that idea that CIOs really need to start managing IT and the order taking business of IT that has been for a long time in the past, starting to shift their behaviors toward being more of a business partner. Is there anything specific that you want to point out there in terms of how they should start thinking differently or operating differently to help enable that kind of shift for themselves?
Yes. Yeah. So it's really important that they start being partners with business versus just order takers. Like that's the thing we've been coaching for a while now is you're not just order takers. Understand the business, understand the value, and it's a shared effort, right? Like lots of things are happening. It's not just an implementation of a new program or new application, right? HR plays a role in helping upskill your people and making sure you've got the right ones. Workforce readiness, operations, helping integrate it. AI into your day-to-day workflows, and you have to understand those workflows. You sort of like Watson, right? You can't just say, here, go use it, and then not understand the workflow that the doctors or the clinicians are actually doing, right? And then business leaders really need to help reinforce adoption within their teams. If it's not being accepted at I'm assuming it picked up that noise. If it's not being accepted at the top level, there's no way it's going to cascade down, right? And so leaders really need to buy in and help share that message because AI isn't just an IT initiative. It's a business initiative enabled by technology. And that's really the thing that they need to embrace is it's a business initiative enabled by technology.
It's a good way to put it. And it's really important. You see CIOs for a long time have probably had a reasonably good understanding of the broader business more than most roles because they support everything, right? And so if I'm in marketing, I may not have a ton of interaction with things like finance or legal, right? Maybe I'm more marketing and sales oriented, right? Customer focus. But in IT, you're touching everything. Everyone uses technology. You've got to talk to everyone, understand their needs. And so they're kind of at a really nice spot to be able to flip that around instead of being the order taker for all those groups, is to turn that around and go out and proactively help them all because they understand enough to at least get the conversation started about what's important to them, what are their motivations, where are their pain points. And now that the CIOs and IT leaders in general, like are in a good position to be able to really take a more proactive stance with that. And I think they need to, not just that they can, but they need to, because otherwise the same kind of thing, people are going to start adopting tools and running in different directions. And the CIO and IT leaders are in a critical role to be able to really help empower and enable in the right direction.
Yeah, the thing that I see in my head, the worst possible thing is that you've got these we call them the shadow IT projects right now. You've got all these shadow AI projects and everything. They all have to be interconnected, but if they're not, it's just going to be a disaster, right? I saw something that said that AI isn't going to replace your business, but business that use AI will replace your business if you're not using it right. So it will be the competitive advantage.
Yeah, and that's the key thing. I think using it right, using it effectively, so that's not just either flash the pan or there's 50 different flashes all going in different directions, right? We want that to be, the start of something that's cohesive and strategic and, really working together. And that's, I mentioned this before, but, one of the talks I gave recently was about not just getting people to collaborate across IT and business, but getting them rowing in the same direction, and even better, rowing in the same boat, because we're all working on the same initiative. We understand the priorities that are the same, that kind of thing. So yeah, really making that effort to really get in the same boat and row together. In terms of what's next for organizations, we talked a lot about, the role of CIO shifting, business partners being more involved and engaged, and really focus on change management being so important because AI, it's a lot of technology focus, but helping people really understand how to get on board together with it, how to be cohesive, how to be strategic, really using these tools for the common good rather than, it's fun to experiment and try things and understand how they work. But in terms of solving real business problems, we want to be more structured and cohesive so we're not just, running around in circles. So, one of the things that we've been focusing a lot on is workshops to help understand what these tools are, where to focus them in terms of what are the high priority initiatives, and then really getting into it and starting to execute. And so that's, I think a big push for a lot of companies now is really starting to think through those things. They're hopefully getting beyond just the experimentation stage and, having fun talking to ChatGPT. Now it's how do we use this as a business tool and do something good with it? So any sort of final advice with what to do or what to look out for there?
Yeah, I would say in closing, if there's one thing I'd leave people with, it's that, again, AI isn't a technology challenge. It's an organizational challenge. And companies that succeed aren't going to be the ones building the best models. Those are built, right? They're the ones who figure out how to bring their people along how to build the trust in the system, how to integrate AI into the workflows, and really adopting those workflows. Because at the end of the day, the value is in AI isn't what it can do, it's in what people choose to do with it, right? And so the future of AI isn't about technology, it's how well we help people adapt to it. It's all about the adoption.
Well, thanks, Diana. It's been great to have you on the show and appreciate your insights. It's always nice to hear from someone who's out there working with different companies in different industries. You can sort of see and compare. I know, just to share with the audience, Diana's, I think the last 3 clients over the last few years have been in banking, in hospital and healthcare, and then in insurance. So getting a good cross-section of, as you said, regulated industries, but also different types of businesses, and be able to see what the similarities are, what the differences are. And it's always funny, we kind of say, every company is unique in exactly the same way. But,
we're all unicorns.
yeah. But you get to see that for real and then be able to share the insights with our guests. So appreciate that a lot. So a couple last things. So you have any recommendations on stuff for people to help learn more about what we talked about, change management and AI and transformation and things like that in terms of books, podcasts, that kind of stuff? Anything to share there?
So I'm going to make a recommendation of a book that may not seem related, but I think it's absolutely related, which is The Power of Habit. And the reason I think it's so important is because it helps people understand why we do the things that we do, right? Sometimes we do things not sometimes, all the time, we do things without thinking about it because our brain chooses the simplest way, right? If you turn left to go to work and now you have a new job and you need to turn right, I guarantee that a couple of times you're going to turn left because that's the way you've always done it. And so when we're talking about adoption or anything else, it's the power of habit. And we're coaching people through the change. We have to take into consideration that they've got 20 years of doing it a certain way, and we're changing that. And so understanding the reward behavior that happens around habits. And anyway, it's a great book, and I stopped drinking sodas because of The Power of Habit. It was a great book for that. So I can testify that. And it helped me understand also why I did the things that I did. Like, why did I go to McDonald's even though I didn't want a soda anymore? Anyway, it was a good book from that perspective.
Well, I'm sure people are going to find a lot of value in what we talked about. So one thing is, if they want to follow up and chat some more, network a bit, or go have a coffee and pick your brain a little bit, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Oh, absolutely. Email me. I'm checking my email more frequently, Diana@projectbrilliant.com, or on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. I have to look it up. I am Diana-Agile Coach. On Twitter, I think I'm Agile Princess because, I am Diana, so it's got to be Agile Princess. So, I'm aging myself because it's not Twitter anymore. It's now X, which I have a really habit. I can't really seem to call it that anymore. So I still call it Twitter.
Well, yep. So yeah, email Diana@projectbrilliant.com, or find her on LinkedIn. Thanks so much, Diana, for being on the show. It's been great.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I've enjoyed it.
Thanks for tuning in to Unlocking Momentum. If today's conversation sparked ideas or gave you a new way to think about leadership, check out our past episodes and resources. Don't forget to follow and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you'd like to connect with me, Aaron Kopel, the Momentum Locksmith, you'll find the link in the show notes.